we want to, on behalf of the High Commission, extend warm felicitations and congratulations to Indians in Kenya, to the Indian diaspora in Kenya, and to our well-wishers and friends in Kenya on the occasion of the 74th Republic Day of India. I think it's a day that we all celebrate with great fervor, with a lot of activity. It's an incredible honor to serve your country, always. And when I joined the government, this was around the turn of the century, actually, and we've gone through so much change in the country. And as diplomats, for us to be able to see, experience, and witness that change, and to interpret that change for the world, and then to also live abroad and see how the world's perception of India changes, and to be in a job that intersects all of these different facets of an evolving, changing India, of how the world sees India, of being part of that change, contributing to that change, and of then intersecting that, integrating that with larger regional, global changes and developments. So you can imagine something like that is extremely exciting. And to do that while serving your country, it's been an incredible honor. I've served in different continents, and it's always been very, very enriching, personally, professionally, and on all fronts, so no complaints. The relationship between India and Kenya, at its foundation, has really been led by the people level exchanges we've had going back into history. So Kenya for us is a maritime neighbor right across the Indian Ocean. And a lot of the early exchanges really have happened across the seas in terms of people trading between India and Kenya, in terms of the early infrastructure development that many Indians contributed to, and many of them stayed behind then and made this their home. So our relationship has an underpinning of warmth, of resilience, and an affinity that has endured through time. Now, when we look at the contemporary partnership essentially underpinned by this resilience and this warmth I spoke about. But that contemporary partnership is today a multifaceted partnership that engages different sectors, so trade and economy, technology, tourism, political exchanges, international cooperation on climate change, culture, and in all of this, we see opportunities for growing it even further. And with the new government that has taken up its position since the second half of last year in Kenya, I think that we are looking forward to working on the opportunities for collaborating with the new government in Kenya on the priorities that the new government has identified. And many of those priorities, frankly speaking, are areas that India has inherent strengths in. So there are many opportunities, I think, for accelerating bilateral cooperation. So as I was just saying, we have already a fairly robust cooperation in multiple verticals, but we are now at that phase where we're looking at fresh opportunities to further upgrade ties. So I think, for instance, trade and investments is an area that we can do much more in. There is a lot happening in India on the economic front, and there are natural convergences between what is happening in India and what can come into Kenya as a result. So we're working on trying to bring those intersections. So for instance, we had an IT delegation come across to Kenya a few months ago, and we have another delegation on services sector coming across to Kenya next week. And we'll have many more such exchanges happening in the coming months, which are in the pipeline, with the idea to bolster cooperation. Similarly, with the pandemic more or less subdued, or hopefully, the worst of it behind us, we can look at resuming, bilateral interactions, which unfortunately were impacted by the pandemic. We had a very successful visit, I must mention, by the Honorable Speaker of the Lower House of Parliament, H.E Birla, to Kenya. And he had the opportunity to meet the top 4 or 5 leaders of this country and exchange views with them. And those meetings were very significant in again underscoring the convergences and the desire to do more with each other. As a High Commission, it's our job to pick up on that and see how we can exploit that into pragmatic, concrete cooperation down the line. The familiarity with each other is pretty high in the case of India and Kenya. In terms of, and in that regard, I think the Indian diaspora in Kenya plays a key role as a bridge in further enhancing understanding between the two countries. Many Indians are well familiar with Kenya. But what happens sometimes in terms of economic sort of growth and economic opportunities and collaboration is that there's always an information gap in terms of the evolving opportunities. And as in High Commission, we try to bridge that as far as possible. So our endeavor is to familiarize, people in Kenya, stakeholders in Kenya with what's happening back home, and what are the developments and how that can, be of benefit to Kenya as well as to India when there is collaboration. Similarly, to apprise people back home what's happening in Kenya and what are the opportunities here. So I think I don't see any major structural challenges in terms of economic cooperation. What I see more is that greater facilitation, greater exchanges, more conversations, more visits will essentially provide that necessary support to further increase this cooperation. And of course, where there is a commitment on the part of both governments and a desire on the part of both governments to strengthen the economic partnership, that always helps to expand this kind of collaboration between business, between companies, and between other stakeholders. Kenya is one of India's important partners in Africa. And in terms of your specific question, again, aligned with what Kenya is looking for in terms of its priorities, we see a lot of intersection points. And I will specifically mention sectors like agriculture. We have offered Kenya a $100 million line of credit under agriculture. We know it's a priority sector for Kenya, and we're willing to do more with Kenya under agriculture. I'll mention the technology space. It's a very exciting area in India. Our startups, for instance, we had just about 500 startups a few years ago. Today, there are over 50,000 startups in India. And we have about 100 unicorns in India, being the third largest concentration of unicorns in the world after the United States and China. So it's a very exciting space in India, and there is interest in Kenya, and there is a priority Kenya places on technology-led development. They themselves are a regional center for technology-related developments. So technology is another area that we're looking at assisting or working with Kenya on, not just at the G2G level, because that's also an area where we have many innovations we can offer, but also at the G2B level or the B2B level. So again, technology is an interesting and exciting sector for collaboration. SMEs, I know, again, SMEs is an area that there is a lot that is possible in, aligned with the priority of Kenya and with our own developments. We have an entire ministry in India, the MSME ministry, that deals with what we call micro, small, and medium enterprises. And there's a lot of experience sharing there that is possible. There are a lot of application and relevance in terms of what we're doing that I think would be of interest to Kenya, and that's another area we can work with them on. So technology, SMEs, agriculture, ICT space in general, education, already we have exchanges, and we'd like to see how that grows further. And pharmaceuticals, healthcare is another area. Again, there's a lot of familiarity I see in Kenya with what India offers in these sectors. Perhaps we can push the envelope, take it a step further, and look at what else we can do to qualitatively upgrade cooperation in this sector, in addition to the kind of exchanges we're already seeing. India did take over the presidency of the G20 in December last year, and this is a one-year presidency that, as you know, gets handed over between the members of the G20. As you know, the members of the G20 comprise, I think, about 85% of global GDP. and they have an annual summit which will be held in India in the second half of 2023. We have, as president of the G20 for this year, identified the theme of One Earth, One Family, One Future for our presidency, which is essentially anchored in our own civilizational ethos of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family, where we recognize that the fact that we are not islands and we have to work with each other, and the solutions to problems and challenges comes from working with each other, and sustainability comes from that. So our priorities in terms of the G20 framework, broadly speaking, fall in the space of issues that are of direct concern to, let's say, developing countries largely, like Kenya, and climate change, green development. Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, had last year launched what we call lifestyle for environment, which is about making choices that are sustainable, that are environmentally friendly, and that mainstream that into our entire economic, social, political sort of ecosystem. So from small everyday habits to how you responsibly use your garbage, your waste, how you recycle that, little things, your power, your solar, hydro. So at the level of governments and at the micro level, at the level of individuals. So lifestyle is something that we have launched last year as a global movement by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In addition, we're also trying to prioritize the movement and accelerate the movement towards the Sustainable Development Goals that have been set by the United Nations, and women-led development, which is important to us. Women-led development is a theme that we have, a priority that we've also identified under the G20. So we'll work with other countries in the G20 framework on these priorities to see how we can, further accelerate the progress on these fronts. And to us, that is important because it, in a sense, reflects, as I said, the pressing priorities and challenges of the developing world. And as an active sort of member of the developing world, and we're very interested to hear Kenya's insights and to see Kenya's views in this regard. And we had a summit, very successful virtual summit recently called the Voices of South Summit that India had done with 130 odd countries, and Kenya's Foreign Minister, Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs and Diaspora, His Excellency Mr. Alfred Mutua, also participated in that. That was important for us to get those voices and to integrate that into the G20 agenda. It is a very, very important milestone in the national journey of India as an independent country. And we have been celebrating on India at 75 Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav for the past 2 years, I think. And we're going to culminate those celebrations with the Independence Day celebrations in August of this year. We've already done a lot of cultural activities, a lot of economic activities under the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. We're looking forward to curating a week of festivities between now and August under Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav in Kenya, and that would include essentially trying to capture the different facets of India and bringing that to the fore through the activities. And I'm personally interested in seeing how we can also recognize and incorporate the role of the Indian diaspora in Kenya into this, because for us, the Indian diaspora in Kenya and other parts of the world are important partners in the progress we've made as a country, as a nation over the 75 years, but also as we enter into what we call the period of Amrit Kal that will go up to our centenary in 2047. How the diaspora can partner us in progress of India, in building bridges of friendship with their, the countries they're in, and so we look forward to, as I said, bringing together this week. But in addition, we've been doing activities throughout the year, even during the pandemic, that highlight various facets of India and the cooperation that exists between India and Kenya and the diaspora. And I'm very grateful to the diaspora in Kenya, because I understand, and I've seen it myself, have been absolutely enthusiastic and active collaborators and partners in that process. And it really encourages us, and it gives strength to what we do here. and we're grateful for that.